In order to generate alarm management reports automatically on a schedule, there are two main considerations that have to be taken into account. The first one is the naming convention of the files, which is designed from the Report Names menu in the Template Studio. Now, when I say naming convention, what I really mean is, for example, when we run this report, say, once a month for the time period of the month, we would want the output file to be named after that month. And that's actually what's done by default in the built-in alarm report template, but I'd like to show you how the configuration is built up from the report names interface. So we could probably have a whole discussion about report names, but if you'd like to know more about this, I'd suggest you look up this chapter in the XLReporter user guide. Now, with the alarm report template in particular, if we modify the name at the workbook level, we can see that there's a subfolder for year, and the report itself is named after the month and the year. And that means, for example, if I ran this report today on a schedule, it would be saved in the reports directory of the project, in a subdirectory named after the template, in another subdirectory named after the year, 2020 in this case, and the file itself would be named alarm report _JUL 2020. Now, because we included it in the on-demand example, I'd also like to introduce the operator position into the report names convention. And now you might be thinking we could just use the position variable that we used previously, but the reason why I don't want to do that is because if we use that, we're going to get the index positions. So for example, for all we would get JUL 2020 0, or for Brewmaster we'd get JUL 2020 1. Not really that useful. So I'm going to show you just a slightly different way to configure this so we actually get the position name involved. So let me back out of report names for a moment here. I'll go into the project variables menu, and I'll add a function register variable, which we can use to hold any type of value, numbers, or text, or what have you. We're going to hold the position name in this case, and I'll double click into the first blank row to add a new variable. I'll stick with the default naming convention of RGXXX, just because that's going to make this variable easier to access from all the design tools. However, I will give a description so we know what it's for. In this case, it's the alarm report name variable, since that's the value it's going to be holding. Now, I just go back into report names, modify the workbook, and then I tack on the RG000 variable, which is available below the calendar variables. The second consideration for scheduled alarm management reports is the schedule design itself, which is accessed from the schedule menu. Now recall that in the on-demand client, we had to prompt the user to select the start date, end date, and the operator position. When the report runs automatically in the background, there won't be a user around to make those selections, so we have to assign them automatically. And that's done by adding in a schedule action, and the action is set a value to a variable. The variables involved in this case are going to be start date, end date, position, and RG000, remember, for the file name. So we'll say start date is the variable to set. The value to set it to is date at 1D, which will evaluate to the first of the given month. And if you'd like to know more about the variables particular to the alarm module, see the Alarm Management User Guide in the Project Explorer. And for more information on setting dates and times variables from the schedule, refer to the Name Types section of the User Guide. Now, when do we run this action? Well, if the report's going to be monthly, we should run this monthly. But in XLReporter, the best practice in general with scheduled reports is to run them a few minutes after the end of the period that you're generating the report for. In other words, if this is a monthly report and we're thinking about July 2020, we would want to run this on August 1st at, say, 12:15 and then generate the report for the previous month. How do we set that up? Well, we set the day schedule to first, and we enter in a value a few minutes after midnight on the 1st, and then we use the time adjustment to push the definition of the month back into July. So recall, if this is August 1st at 12:15 a.m., we adjust the time back by 1 day, then for all intent and purposes, the month for all the variables in the report is now July again. The next variable we establish is the end date, and that's going to be set to date at 31D. And yes, we know that not all months have 31 days in them. This expression will always evaluate to the last day, regardless of what number that is. Next, we set position, and that's going to be set to 1 for brewmaster. And then we set RG000 to brewmaster. Recall, for the file name. And now that we have all of the variables set up, we add an action to update the report. And for the built-in alarm report, it's recommended to update the dashboard sheet. And if we had other positions in here, we could just do them in sequence. So for example, the start date, end date aren't changing, but the position, index, and name are changing, so you would just repeat this sequence here. So you would say set position 2, set RG00 to position 2's name, then update again, and it would go into a unique file for that position. Recall, because we have RG000 in the naming convention. Now, let's step through this report. We don't have to wait for the month to roll around. We don't have to wait for the month to roll around to generate it. We can use test to force it manually. And if you recall, the on-demand time period I used was June through August 2017. So if I run this on August 1st, 2017, we'll get the July report. And I just run through these things in sequence and run them for the same time, just like how it would happen automatically on the schedule. And then now, finally, we run the report. And now we can go and check out the results. And we could do that by opening the report in Excel if it's installed, or we can use the built-in Workbook Reports viewer. And now notice that here in the output, and this is reflecting the folder structure of the project, we've got the reports folder, subfolder for alarm report template, subfolder for the year 2017, and then we have the July 2017 brewmaster report, and it's got the alarm data which represents the areas included in the brewmaster position.